Thank you, everyone. So I'm Ramon. I head up our social media and influencer department across our digital media business in Europe. And I'm here to talk about how we're taking our creator content and our cultural content and putting that into our performance funnel to drive tangible business results. This all started because I've been in situations where we talk about the results and the performance of our creator and social content. And when you take it to the business, it's met with so what? So what does this mean for our business? And quick show of hands if anyone's been in that situation. For those that don't put up their hands, I'm assuming you're the one asking, so what? So it's a fair question, but it also it's one that shows a disconnect between how we measure and communicate the value of our work. At Adobe, we're truly trying to maximize the value of the content, of the partnerships we have with our creators. And that starts with reframing the role of our influencer content. For too long, creator marketing has been siloed. The content that's created for the feed stays on the feed. And for 99% of the time, that stays as a top-of-funnel awareness play only. We've begun to shift that, attributing the content that we create to revenue, to search volume, and more business metrics. So it begs the question, what if your most effective ad this year comes from a creator in their bedroom? Because today your brand isn't just what you say about yourself. It's not being discussed in shareholder meetings and stakeholder meetings. It's what's being said about the brand outside, whether we're there or not. And that really changes the narrative for creators, moving them from media partners to brand architects to cultural translators and to narrative shapers. We need to stop treating them as one-off vendors and start treating them for what they are, as their own creative agencies. They're closer to the consumer. They know what resonates. And at Adobe, they're also our community. They're part of our product feedback loop, and we want to make our products better for them. So that means we need to shift from creators to collaborators. And that's not only in our mindset, but in the actions that we take. For us, this means bringing creators into the process a lot earlier. This is when content shines. Otherwise, we risk losing the very reason we partner with a creator, which is their personality, their content style, and to tap into culture. We often talk about authenticity in cultural marketing, and it's become a bit of a buzzword because we don't explain what that authenticity means. For us at Adobe, that not only means identifying the right people to work with, people who are genuinely passionate about the product, and allowing them to truly partner with us on content. That means moving to collaborating, not briefing. Our briefs have mandatories, but they remain creatively open. We explore what content formats our creators already use and see whether the brand can add value to the audiences. And finally, it means longevity. Not one-off content asks. It allows for greater storytelling and narrative. Take our recent partnership with the Professional Idiots and our product Adobe Express. This is a trio of recent grads who have taken their hand to creating DIY tasks. I saw them produce a video that included our Adobe products on their YouTube channel. I sent them a DM and asked them how they would want to work with us. No brief, just pure collaboration. The result is a 13-week project in which they turn a lorry into a mini golf van. It stays true to their wild and wonderful content, but it also allows us to inject our product into that, showing the value and adding that to their content. Each week, they talk about how Adobe Express helps them in their journey. That started with originally designing the golf course, to scheduling their content, and generating their new logo using our generative AI features. So the next time you work with a creator, I'd start by asking two questions. What would your audience care about, and what story would you tell? When you give creators a seat at the table, that content becomes more impactful, more native, and more human. That's when it starts to perform well beyond the social feed. As social and brand marketers, even when we do create great content, we often fail to close that loop when it comes to measurement. That's why at Adobe, our influencer and social teams have begun to partner with those who specialize in measurement already. Our paid media teams, our performance teams, and our data teams. These teams have been attributing results for decades. Whether it's click-throughs, conversions, brand lift, return on media spend, this is their comfort zone. It allows them to tell the internal business results to our stakeholders whilst allowing us to focus on what's important, our external storytelling. Measurement no longer needs to be the weakest link. So thinking about when content goes beyond the feed. What if we stopped thinking of influencer content as confined to it, and what if we repurposed it across the full funnel? Whether that looks as influencer content in above the line, influencer content in email nurturing and retargeting campaigns, to make sure that the brand stays consistent from the social feed into our other forms of marketing. And finally, A/B test creator-led messaging versus traditional brand assets. When we stop treating creator content as creator content and start treating it as brand assets, it allows us to test and learn in new ways. At Adobe, we've really doubled down on this final point. Internally, we call it creator amplification. And essentially, it's our way of taking our storytelling assets into the performance funnel. This isn't about creating ads. It's taking about the content we create and comparing it against to our traditional studio and brand-led assets. I'm not going to overcomplicate the model. It boils down to 4 key points. There are things that we need to consider along the way, and it starts with understanding the content needs of the business. Where is this content going to land? It helps us then work with our agency partners so that they factor in additional usage rights to make sure that it can be used there. Once we have the content, it's about creating a sharing process where that content is streamlined and everyone knows what they're responsible for, who's creating the ad copy, when those usage rights expire, and making sure that the content goes live and is taken down within those dates. Once it's in the performance funnel, it's imperative to set those clear objectives. This will depend on your business, but then it comes down to the measurement and reporting. None of this matters if we then can't track the results of the activity and be able to benchmark it against existing data. Once we have the insights, it's really important to look just beyond the numbers and at the creative. Having done this for a year, I wanted to give some tips to give you guys a head start if you're looking to implement this. It starts with volume. This isn't about quantity over quality, it's about quantity and quality. Not every piece of content will be a winner, which is why you need to make sure your media teams have various assets to optimize between. It's not always the content that you expect to perform well that does. And that leads me on to the second point. Organic success doesn't necessarily equal paid success. It's important to be flexible, use it as a guide, not as a rule. It's tempting to think that whatever goes off organically will do the same in paid. But this isn't always the case. And it's why we need to look at that creative as opposed to just the numbers. Is there a trend between the content that is performing well on organic but not performing well on paid, and vice versa? It will help you refine the process and figure out what works well. Securing usage rights. So this is an important one because as a social team, our boosting tends to last for 1 or 2 weeks. And with performance, it doesn't work that way. They need more time to run the ads to optimize for success. So if you're only negotiating 2 weeks to a month with your creators, you're not setting this process up for success. 3 months allows us to optimize rather than panic in a short window. And when you extend the usage rights, you're not just stretching your budgets, you're improving your ROI. And then the final one, and this point I will hammer home until the cows come home, it's bring your creators in early. We need to stop thinking of them as only part of the content machine. They're marketing savvy and they know how social works. If they know your objectives, they can help. It's not just about creating more together, but creating smarter. I've taken you through what we do at Adobe, but I'm sure you're wondering, so what? What have the results been? And I've wanted to highlight a couple that we've taken. The gray line is our performance before we started creator amplification. The green is our average since creator amplification. And the blue is when we look at Photoshop and Express as our products. The reason I've taken these two is you have 2 products at different ends of the scale. One is our flagship app that has existed for over 25 years and has a huge awareness. Adobe Express is targeted at small businesses and marketers. This shows that creator amplification works regardless of the awareness of the product, regardless of the audience. It's not been a one-off success for us. It's happened across the board, and it's happened across the globe. In EMEA, we're now seeing 30% of our media spend go towards creator content. If you think that a year ago that was 0%, it should give us an indication of the scale and the success. Before anyone who is in a brand team or a studio team says or thinks that I'm trying to advocate for moving all spend into creators, that isn't the case. It really is about having that variety and that mix of assets, which is what the chart on the right shows. When you're able to combine your BAU with creator amplification, that's where we've seen the most success. Wanting to take you through one particular case study that we've run in the past year to really show how this has worked. For Adobe Express, we partnered with Stephen Bartlett and his team at Flight Studio. We wanted to target our small business audience, and we couldn't think of anyone better in the UK than someone who has built their social empire from the ground up and whose team use our products day in and day out. We wanted to select the right talent and then partner with them on the creative. That's when we found their obsession with manifestation and the importance of the manifesto to their business. So we took that, created a guide, and created templates for other businesses to start their own manifesto. We created content not only with Stephen, but with individual members of the Flight Studio team who use our products day in and day out. We had a microsite, we had host reads on the Diary of a CEO, we had emails, we had in-app notifications. We really took this execution beyond social and ran it through our creator amplification funnel. The results start with 27 million views and engagements, 2,000 signups to Adobe Express, 1,000 uses of our templates, a 15-minute dwell time in product. And then when we took it into creator amplification to extend, we saw a 20% uplift in brand recall, double-digit increases in perception and consideration, a 118% higher click-through rate versus our average, a 230% increased view-through rate versus our average, 18% cheaper acquisitions, and 65% cheaper installs. This truly answers the question, so what, to the business. It enabled us to focus on our brand building. We had our performance tracking for short-term measurement, and this is a repeatable formula. It doesn't just work with high-profile talent. We've been doing this with everyday students as well, and the results have been the same. So how do you go from so what to strategic value? It starts with turning creators as vendors to creators as consultants. It's moving away from operating in silos to partnering with different teams across the marketing function. This is when truly the magic happens. It's going away from content that just lives on feed to content that fuels social, email, web, and media. The gap here is on purpose. We didn't have a model to begin with. We've then operationalized this process under creator amplification, and it keeps our teams accountable and holds us responsible. I'd like to leave everyone with a quote from me, but essentially it means creator-led and cultural content is not just a brand-building exercise anymore. It is a growth engine, but only if we treat it like one. This isn't about sacrificing our art and our storytelling, but it's an evolution of how we position ourselves within the business as key contributors. We've been able to show the performance of social content, of cultural content, to our business in the short term, whilst not sacrificing our storytelling and brand narrative in the long term. Thank you very much.